So welcome back to another video of me just trying to grind out while doing a recording. So today I'll be doing some werewolf hunt master while I'll going to be talking about today's topic. You seem to really like the last video, so I'm just going to do another one. So I really don't mind just talking about this. So yeah, let's get started. Hello and welcome to another JMP video. I'm your host JonNario, and today I will be talking about delves in general. So yeah, I will be doing delves. Obviously, I will be grinding the Wolf Hunter Master, or whatever the hell the name is called on this boss, to see if there's a maybe chance of me actually having a chance of actually getting the Wolf Hunter costume. So might as well just keep it trying it out. While I do that, I'm going to be talking about on delves. I'm not going to be just going in depth and just going over everything that is regarding delves, because otherwise I'll be here for like 2 hours, and I really don't want to talk about it 2 hours, and even less, I don't want to edit a 2 hour long video. Yeah, so I'm just going to be talking about like things that I like or and dislike about the delve. Also, let me know in the comment section down below, what do you personally think about the delves, because from what I've heard, a lot of people really dislike the delves, and I don't blame them, because there's a lot of things that are bad with the delves, and if you dislike it, just let me know why, because some people have different opinions. Some people might say it's boring, but I don't think that's a very good reason. Just saying, oh, it's boring. But it's like, why is it boring? Is it because of the aesthetics? Is it because of the fact that the rooms are terrible? It's hard to navigate? And is it the rewards that are just terrible? And so on and so forth. Like, just let me know what you think. Then just go like, oh yeah, it's boring. Like, okay. So yeah, I will be giving away my own personal reasons and opinions on delves, and just do a little bit of a talk about the delves in general. So right now I'm just going to put in some context behind it. I have indeed grinded over 17,000 delves as of the time I'm making this video. So I do have plenty of experience with the delves, and I have grinded literally every single memento in the entire game, including all of the biomes, which I actually did get the last one today as of the time I recorded this video. The last one was my Crack the Core Bio Memento, which that was the one that I got it today while doing a boss Depth Stepper for the Face Bio, like the Face Spider. And yeah, so I'm going to be talking about like the delves, what are going to be some of the good things, some of the bad things regarding delves. And one of the things that it really made me just want to stop playing the game for a while, because I got so burnt out of the delves. It was honestly ridiculous. I didn't even want to do the weeklies, and I'm just going to go over everything in this video. So even with 17,000 delves completed, I still don't have everything that is in the delves. So in terms of content, and if you only care about just content and just grinding everything out of the delves, then delves, it is an excellent way to just do at least something in the game, because there's so many things that you can do in the game. You can grind for a specific belt, you can grind for mementos, you can grind for whatever the hell you want, crystal level 4. So you can grind for so many things in the delves, and that's definitely a good thing, because it's a lot of replayability, and having a lot of replayability is a good thing, especially for a game like MMO that is just, you know, heavily based on grinding. Not going to say that the grinding could be like great or bad, which is where the bad thing comes into play. This is where the majority of people's opinion come into play, and just saying that it is boring. I understand that completely, but you cannot deny that the delves has a lot to offer you in terms of content, which is much better than it was when it was in Shadow Towers, which obviously delves is a replacement of the Shadow Towers. Shadow Towers lacked a lot of content. Like literally, you could literally just do Monday grindings and that was it, and you literally just ignore the Shadow Towers all the way until the next week. So yeah, Shadow Towers were just mainly as a Monday grind and Sunday for speedruns, and that was it. That was essentially what it was. Either that or the other thing was badges, but you can do badges right now. But yeah, Shadow Towers, I generally don't see it being that much better than delves, if I'm being 100% honest with you. You know, in terms of aesthetics, yes, I can full-heartedly understand the Shadow Towers, how pleasing it was to look at, and how much better in terms of navigation it was, the Shadow Towers, comparable to this one. But the constant loading, the constant crashing, that it was inside the Shadow Towers, of just in case you didn't remember that. Like literally going over every single room was one loading, and the chances of Trove crashing, especially on console, it was pretty high. So yeah, I'm not going to be doing like a comparison between Dells and Shadow Tower, but yeah, those are some of my opinions regarding the Shadow Towers, and some of the things that I seen it blown out of proportion, just saying like, oh yes, no, like Shadow Towers is just infinitely better than Dells, when you think about it, really wasn't. But yeah, anyways, just going back into the topic of the Dells, in terms of content, great, it's excellent. You literally, like, it feels like endless, the amount of things that you can do. However tedious it can be, you can just grind the banner styles, you can grind crystal level 4, you can grind the mementos, you can grind whatever you want inside the Dells. Like, there's so many things that you can do. Whether it is good content or not, that is entirely up to you. Either way, that is number one. Number two, it is going to be obviously the lack of loading and the lack of crashing. I rarely crash inside the Dells. I only crash in the Dells when I enter inside the Dells. That's the only thing, obviously because of loading. So, which is much better, because there were some times that I spent hours inside a Dell portal, or probably like an hour or something like that, and I didn't even crash like once for all, and that is rare considering that Trove crashes like every 10 minutes, like I'm not even kidding. And for me in Dells, I rarely even crash, and it is extremely good in that regard. It is pretty stable, for at least on my end. It's a pretty stable experience. There is barely any lag, there is, you know, no crashing and all that good stuff. It is a stable experience. So that's another good thing, which is not exactly some of the best praises, considering that we're talking about Trove right here, a game that crashes like I just mentioned every 10 minutes. So yeah, it's not the biggest praise compared to other games, but considering that it is Trove, it is a big praise. But yeah, those are some of the good things regarding the content, and the fact that it is a pretty stable experience. And obviously some of the objectives can be quite interesting, but that is also a double-edged sword in my eyes, because there are some objectives that are just utterly terrible, and there are some objectives that are just good, which it brings a little bit of variety. I don't know how you even pronounce that word. I always had troubles pronouncing that word, variety. God damn it. Those Spanish pronunciation, that Spanish tongue right there. So those are some of the good things regarding the Dell. Some of the bad things regarding the Dells, it is going to be, again, first of all, the objective. Once again, some of the objectives can be quite good, but some of the objectives are just terrible. This is a perfect example of a terrible objective. The collect crystals. Unless you're grinding this on Mondays, which is what I'm grinding it today, the collect 24 crystals by yourself is incredibly tedious and incredibly annoying to do. And not only that, that is not the only objective that you can do. And this is coming from a person that does have a max out Vecamatic. Imagine someone without a Vecamatic. I actually have tested out, and it is a nightmare for you to actually just gain all of the crystal, just jumping around like an idiot, grabbing the crystal one by one. Like, it is utterly just one of the most ridiculous objectives out there that I have ever come across, because especially when there's multiple players where the objective, like the amount of crystal required, it keeps getting increased more and more. That is trash and ridiculous, the fact that that is actually an objective and a thing. The other objective that I don't like, it is going to be empty rooms. Empty rooms has to be probably my least favorite objective out of them all, which it wants you to empty it out, a complete room in particular. And I don't like it because, considering that some of the rooms can be, they're not the largest, but they are not small, and especially when the room has a ton of enemies, you can easily just miss out one of them. And again, this is coming from a person that does have a max of Vecamatic. Without it, it's just literally just killing all of the enemies one by one, looking at an enemy. So you just keep searching all of the enemies in that room, and there's sometimes an enemy that is just camping in a corner, which can happen and is very annoying. So yeah, there are some objectives that are just like that, and they're just... For me, it makes the experience less enjoyable, because there are sometimes that you're just running around and they just completed Dells that is just, for example, like this one, Monolith, which is one of my favorite ones, and it is definitely an efficient one. which is consistent. You know, if you're doing a regular non-labyrinth room, it is literally like one monolith, then 2 empty rooms, then one monolith, then 2 empty rooms, and literally that's how you generally know all of them. It just works perfectly. It's consistent, it's fast, and you know what you're up against. And especially if you're doing the higher delves, you can literally just do setups, like for example do the 1x1 block, so you can actually just trap all of the enemies in a 1x1, so you can just destroy them all quickly. Those are good things that I personally like about the delves. Like that objective in particular, I really do like it. But when you come across into something like, oh yeah, you finish out the monolith, and then after you finish out the monolith, you go into an empty room. That empty room is just going to end up taking like 2 or 3 times the amount that it takes. I personally don't like it. It ruins my experience because it becomes like some of the grinding becomes a little bit too tedious. Generally don't like that one. Then the other things that I don't like about the delves is the lack of rewards. Yes, the lack of rewards, it is a thing that I generally don't like about it. I don't know why they don't make the delves just as efficient or close to being as efficient in terms of flux farming as Geotopside. If you want players to play the delves, you have to reward them with the delves, because there are some times that you complete a delves that will take you like over 2 minutes, let's just say, to complete a full delve room just to get 2 items, and those 2 items could easily just be one relic and 1 legendary item, and that is pretty much a waste of a floor, a waste of 2 minutes. Versus in Geotopside, where in 2 minutes you can easily just complete 3 or 4 dungeons, or sometimes even more. So, and in those 3 or 4 dungeons, you can easily just gain around 3 to 4 stellars, or maybe even more. Yeah, in terms of rewards regarding those, it's generally not a good thing. And yes, again, you can just technically just talk about the mounts, the allies that you can get inside the delves. So it is obviously you can easily just gain millions of flux, but only if you're lucky and if you're grinding a specific boss in particular in order to actually gain a chance of actually getting the mount, which, talking from experience, is generally not a good thing, because it can be quite extremely inconsistent, and sometimes you will never ever actually get any of the mounts. You probably could grind all day and probably not get any mounts, and that could happen. And honestly, in my own personal opinion, that's not a very efficient way to actually grind. Well, I mean, for newer players that cannot make any flux whatsoever, that had no Magify to compare to Geotopside, then yes, probably that could be a really good thing. But for someone that has even a decent amount of Magify, it's not worth just going for delves if you want flux. It's not rewarding the slightest. You can easily just kill hundreds and hundreds of enemies and just get like 2 stellars from those hundreds and hundreds of enemies, which those hundreds of enemies could easily mean like 3 or 4 rooms. And like I just mentioned before, it could take you 1 to 2 minutes to complete 1 room. So just to gain 2 stellars, would you spend like literally 8 to 10 minutes just to get 2 stellars, versus in Geotopside, where you could complete a 5-star dungeon, can you complete it in less than a minute, and that 5-star dungeon can easily net you 7, 8, or 9 stellars, and that is within a minute, versus 8 minutes of those, which can grant you nothing. And not only that, there's so many untradeable resources that you cannot trade it with other players. They are very important. Electrolytic crystal, just as a main example, which those electrolytic crystal could easily just be selling for so much flux, because you need hundreds and literal hundreds of thousands of electrolytic crystal to gain everything that grants mastery. And there are so many endgame players that are just grinding only just to get those little bit of extra mastery. That's what I was doing before I actually just stopped caring about the banner styles, but it's honestly a ridiculous amount that you need in order to actually gain everything. And let me tell you, like, in terms of reward, it's just blasphemous, because it's ridiculous. Like, you have to spend so much time to get the resources that you could need in order to craft some of the items that are, for some reason, they require an ungodly amount of items, and those items, you generally just get them for mastery. And the thing is, unless you're a mastery farmer, those items are useless. And I don't know why they keep insisting and just keep adding items in the required, like electrolytic crystal. No one is generally doing a lot of delves, because the amount of items that are required is way too much. So I don't understand why they keep just making items like the items that they added in the tune-up update, like the bard costume and such, those items cost literally tens of thousands of electrolytic crystal just to gain one costume. In terms of mastery point value, you can easily just gain a costume from the chaotic crafting table, which could net you the same amount of mastery points with much less amount of work. And then all of that ties into just, you know, a terrible experience, because you have to grind in for so long and you get no rewards, and it honestly is just a bummer to actually just grind out the delves. That is the main problem that I see for me personally, but I see a lot of people going for, and that is going to end up being that delves require you to put in an ungodly amount of work, but you don't get rewarded, versus, let's just say, Teotasai, where you put in the same amount of hours and gain much more rewards than just grinding delves over and over again. Like, unless you specifically need delve items, that it is not worth going for the delves. That is the main problem that I have with the delves. Aside from, you know, that it is not very aesthetically pleasing to look at, like, it is generally just a different shade in the delves. Like, there's some of the rooms are just absolutely disgusting, and they can be just quite confusing. The labyrinth rooms in the delves, they are hella confusing, especially the newer ones that they keep adding in. There are so many things that just, for me personally, I don't like about the delves, especially regarding aesthetic. Like, you can easily just made some of the rooms exclusive. Let's just say, for example, they could have easily just made, if we're talking about monolith, they could easily just make a specific room for monolith. So it's actually telling, because there are some monolith spawns that they are very hard to spot, and when they spawn in such an uncomfortable area, and if that monolith has a lot of enemies, you can easily just get one or two enemies that just spawn in the other side of the room, and then you have to search for it. And honestly, that's not a good thing. That's not good design, in my own opinion. Like, not that long ago, I actually just found out a room that it seems to be pretty rare to spawn inside the Crack the Core biome, and it seems to be like a big open room similar to like a boss room, but it was just dedicated to the mini boss objective that it just spawns inside the Crack the Core. I felt that was something that delves needed. Like, if we're doing a specific objective, this is like the horrible objective that I mean, like empty rooms is why. Let's just say, for example, like the monolith, like I just mentioned, you know, it's a specific room for the monolith, so it doesn't glitch out and it doesn't have any problems. Like the mini boss, it should have like an own specific room for the actual boss itself, or the mini boss. Like, I just encountered one time, it shouldn't be random, that should be like literally all the time, because there were so many times in that mini boss objective where I ran past the mini boss because it was camping in a corner. I was literally just looking for every single room, and when I just completed it, like the objective got to the boss room, I didn't even kill the mini boss, and when I was just looking at the mini boss, it was literally like, let's just say in like the third room of the delve, just in a corner, just hiding behind literally like a bunch of decoration items, which is another thing that I need to address. It's just going to be the amount of decoration items that are just lying in the middle, like this one for example, that are just blocking the way. I do feel that those are just terrible additions, and the fact that the delves are just way too enclosed, those are another thing that I personally don't like. I like open rooms like this one for example. There's so many more that you can actually just complete that they are just very, very open, but there are so many rooms that are just, that makes you think like, why is this room like literally like a tube? It's so small, it's so ridiculously difficult to navigate. It has a bunch of stairs where enemies can just go up and down, and it doesn't make the experience very enjoyable. And there's so many things that I personally don't like about the aesthetic of the delves, which is a thing that just drives me away from it. And that's not talking about the other things that don't like about the delves, like for example the amount of grind that you need to put into the delves, especially for certain items that are just purely random, which is not a good thing considering that a lot of things, like this game revolves very heavily on mastery. It's just not a good thing considering that if you put in so many RNG related items, this is the same thing that I was talking about the mementos for this event. Like, if you keep putting in so many RNG items, what is going to end up translated then to the newer player? Newer players are going to be extremely discouraged because there's going to be so many items that are going to be tied to complete 100% luck, and if they want to keep up with all of the players that have been playing the game for at least a year or so, they need to put in such a ridiculous amount of work in order to just keep up. And that's not necessarily a good thing. The only thing that they added in was, the mastery cap. And with the mastery cap, I mean, that was a somewhat of a good solution, but at the same time, that wasn't really that big of a solution because it means that the game is limited. They keep adding in items over and over and over again into this game that are just mastery related. Events, store packs, whatever it might be, and just limiting all of that because for the majority of the time people just get them because of mastery. And if you limit them, then what's the point in just grabbing them? That's why I've seen and heard so many people just say like, I don't care about the grind. I don't care about that. I'm already like maxed out in terms of stats, because there's no point in just going over, all of the items that just require mastery and they're just too tedious, where the majority of the items come from delves. If they want to keep adding in items that just, motivate the players in order to actually gain more mastery, they need to just give a little bit more purpose. So the fact that they limited the mastery back then, and they just keep adding in items that are just way too tedious to get, people are going to be discouraged to actually grind the new updates and the new stuff that are just related to delves, which is what a lot of people really I can see that don't like about the delves. It's like, you need to put in so much time in order to grind one specific item that grants you like 5 mastery points, like the mementos, for example. And there are people who are willing to go for it, like myself, but the majority of people are not going to go for them because what's the point? There's no point in just going over that because it's just terrible. It's way too much work for no rewards. And then those are people that are just going to stay there standing doing delves over and over and over again without gaining any income. Like, one of the majority of the time that you see me is that a lot of people see me when they ask me about how much flux do I have on streams. I usually just tell them I don't have a lot of flux. And that's because for the majority of the time I'm just grinding delves, and in delves you don't gain anything. Like, I could literally just spend hours and like crazy amounts of hours, like I just showcased in the last video. Like last week alone I got 23,000 effort. Today it is Monday and I've already gotten almost 5,000 effort. Look at the difference between me and the second player, which is 1,500. Like, I put in like a ridiculous amount of grinding, but I don't gain anything. That same amount of time that I put in into delves, if I put it into geo topside and grinding, I could have easily just made 30 mil. Yeah, just making 30 mil versus what I made right here, which I made maybe like 1 mil to 2 million flux just grinding delves over the span of around 25,000 effort, just doing delves over and over again. So for 25,000 effort, which is for a lot of people considered ridiculous, 25,000 effort for only 1 million flux, versus in GeoTopside where I can make 1 million flux in less than 2 hours, and 25,000 effort took me around 30 hours, and I'm not kidding, and well over 30 hours in fact. And that's a thing that I don't like about the delves. There's a lot of things that are just too tedious. Even if you do grind that tedious amount, you don't get rewarded in another way, shape or form, the same way that you would grind or just get rewarded in GeoTopside. And with all of that, yes, I do increase a lot of mastery, but at the same time I just don't feel like I'm progressing too much, because if I wanted to buy, let's just say I wanted to buy a store pack, 3,000 credits usually, and the 3,000 credit store pack, so I need to just go into GeoTopside for that one. So that a lot of the time that I spend in GeoTopside I could have spent, let's just say, doing delves. But since delves is not rewarding, there's no point in just doing them. Just doesn't encourage people to play delves, and that's what I don't like about them. Like, it doesn't benefit the player that grinds the delves a lot. It's just like, either go to GeoTopside and grind flux, or go into delves and grind all of the rest of the mastery that are just extremely ridiculous to get. Right now I'm in the neutral, like on delves, because in terms of content, like I just mentioned in the beginning of the video, in terms of content is great, because if it weren't for delves I wouldn't be grinding just as much as I am right now. I wouldn't put in 30 hours in a matter of a week just to grind out delves, just to actually just progress in the delves. Generally that's a good thing. That's the thing that you want, that you want the content to last. But in the case of delves, it's just not worth doing. It's simply not worth doing. And let me see if I do have any more portals. And I ran out of portals. God damn it, those portals just ran out super quickly. That's probably where the bad thing comes into play. The good thing is just insane amount of content. It's the amount of replayability, the amount of items and stuff that you can just grind in, and you know, you can put in so much time in this delves and just have fun with it. And it is honestly a blast if you care about just doing anything that just increases your mastery. Like, you know, there's so many things that you can just do in order to increase your mastery. So yeah, that's a thing that you can just see it. But the bad thing is just that there's so many things that just makes the delves not enjoyable. Like some of the objectives are just wide and terrible. There's some of the, like, the aesthetic of the game is just not very pleasing to look at. It's just a different shade. The fact that delves are not rewarding in the slightest, like, you know, there's so many things, and I'm not even going into full details on some of the actual things that I really don't like memento grinding. I didn't went too much in detail on it. Some of the items that they just keep adding in, the banner styles, daily memento gateway, the portals and all that stuff. Like the amount of portals that are just in the game right now is astronomical. Like there's so many things that, you know, I could just keep discussing regarding the delves, and I don't want to go too much in detail because otherwise I will be here for like 2 hours, because there's so many things to talk about. Just those are probably the main things that I don't like about it. Way too tedious to grind, not aesthetically pleasing to look at, and not rewarding in the slightest if you do grind out the ridiculous amounts of time. The good thing is, you know, content and more content. You at least have something to do in the game. You know, there's always something that you can do inside the delves. Let's just say you want to grind Luna Eclipse, go ahead and just get Daughter of the Moon portals. Or let's just say you want to grind the Crack the Core Biomemento. You can just grind in the Death Stepper and just grind the Biomemento. Which, another thing that I didn't even cover is the depth steppers in general. You know, like I just mentioned, there's so many things to do. Oh, I already talk about a lot of these things in my streams. So some of you all actually just drop into the stream whenever I do stream. This will sound very familiar to what I talk about. And if I'm being just 100% honest with you, seeing that delves is going to be the new main thing on Trove, which it would be better for them to just go into Uber 11 and just keep going with the regular adventure world. But if we're going into the delves, and so be it. If they want to make the delves the new main thing, they need to make the delves enjoyable, which is what a lot of people just are discouraged about, which is why some people really don't like about them. And it could be from what it looks like the fact that you're enclosing like a pretty much a hallway, just going all the way towards the end, which again is not that big of a deal because that's what you used to do in Shadow Tower, but Shadow Towers were much more aesthetically pleasing, unlike this one, which it feels more like a tube, rather than in Shadow Towers it was more like actual rooms that you could traverse everywhere, even though the majority of people will just go ahead and just target the world bosses and just go to the Curse Goal as fast as possible. With all of that, it still doesn't even matter. It was still just better to look at. That's just how it is with the delves, at least for me. I could just discuss more, but there's so many things that I just don't like about it. Honestly, like comparable to what delves used to be when they launched, the delves right now are just a dream version of the delves when they launched, because there's so many things that you can do that before it was just ridiculously difficult to get. Like some of the mementos are just much easier to obtain because of the introduction of the depth steppers. You know, some of the items are just much easier to obtain because, again, depth steppers, like the mounts and such. Electrolytic crystal has become a little bit easier to obtain, not only because of the introduction of the understack portal that you can buy from the NPC that is just only understack, and not only that, with the glowing crystal caches that also just improve upon just getting more the electrolytic crystals. So electrolytic crystals are slightly better. They're still bad, but they're slightly better. The fact that also depth stepper just made so that you can actually just choose the difficulty or the depth that you want. So if you didn't have the chance before actually just doing a private delves that were in the lower one, so if you can grind the specific mementos or grind a lot of random mementos, then that could be a thing. So it is better for solo players. There are so many things that they just added into the delves that are just better. But again, they keep just adding in so many items that just keep making the delves much more tedious, and that's personally I think that I don't like. But either way, if I just keep up, I'm just going to keep rambling over and over and over again. If you made it this far, just hashtag comment fix delves. Also, if you made it this far, just let me know what you think on delves. Do you like it, dislike it? What do you think of them? If they're good, bad, whatever, and why? I already gave you some of my points of view, and not even all of them, like all of the things that I could go in much more detail, which there's a lot of things, and so I just mentioned a couple of them in this pretty long live commentary. Anyways, thank you for watching, thank you for sticking around as always, leave a like, subscribe for more content like this, and I hope to see you guys next time. Take care and keep on hunting. See ya.